Welcome to the Digital Leaders Club podcast.
Hey, good to see you.
You too. So I know we've known each other for a few years.
We
We've
have.
done a previous webinar on sustainability, I think 2 or 3 years ago. I think a lot's changed for yourself since that webinar.
Yes.
We've had lots of different little conversations on the side, which haven't been recorded, all about this important topic of sustainability and marketing. I think we're both very passionate about it,
Yep.
particularly on how marketers can approach the sustainability best practices in their own teams. But I think feedback from the industry, and you probably have it as well, that a lot of people just don't know where to start, have a lot of good intentions,
Right.
and are conflicted about the profit line versus actually making an incremental change to the environment and be really impactful. So yeah, I think a lot of listeners will be really, really keen to hear some of the kind of wins, the quick wins that you can talk about, but also some of the strategies they can implement. And you've got a really interesting profile. I know we were talking about this just before. So you've basically hit every single level that you can potentially hit within marketing. And
Yeah.
I work with some really interesting companies.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned it a few minutes ago that I don't really know anyone in my network, and I know quite a lot of marketeers and e-commerce experts who are really as passionate as you in terms of the sustainability side, and have made a really good shift in your education in sustainability and incorporate that within the marketing sphere. So I think a lot of people who may have not done as much as yourself would be really interested to hear your thoughts, your journey with this, and what you finding within the industry. So I guess to kick us off, I mean, could you give everyone a brief history of your background and talk about where you're up to with things at the moment?
Yeah, of course. So a career marketer, as you know well.
Yeah.
So 30 years in client side and agency side, big global corporates, 10 years at Microsoft winning Windows. Then went agency side, did digital transformation for 15 years, working for companies like Omnicom and Philips, was chief digital officer at Accent Nobel. Then started consulting, automotive, finance, was in Visa for a couple of years too. So a big corporate marketing sort of background. I'd started off in the British Standards Institution, after university, and actually helped launch ISO 14001, which is the environmental best practice standard. Got to work with the then Environment Minister Michael Meacher, Jonathan Pollitt, who set up Friends of the Earth. So had that sheep dip into the world. Then it sort of went into my personal life. So always very passionate about it personally, and went off on that career I've just described. And it was only about 4 or 5 years ago now when I was consulting on an automotive client, and my daughter literally walked up to me and said, "Daddy, is your job good for the environment?" And it was something I'd felt in my heart for ages, that actually, what am I doing? Is it actually good from a sustainability point of view, not just from an environmental point of view? But I couldn't articulate it. I couldn't understand it properly. It just felt wrong. So went and retrained, Cambridge University Institute for Sustainability Leadership. That equipped me with the tools and the knowledge and the insight to be able to articulate what was going wrong with marketing, which was really valuable. What was arguably more valuable was the way that I was greeted by my peers on that course as a marketeer. At that point in time, there weren't many marketeers on that course. And when you kind of walked up to your fellow students and went, "Hi, I'm Paul, I'm a marketeer," you got that, "Ooh, really? Aren't you the problem?"
Yeah.
And it's strange. On that, we talk about having our devil horns growing. Us and a couple of other marketeers were cowering in the corner, thinking we need to get out of this industry, because outside of the marketing industry, marketing has a really bad reputation, especially in the sustainability community. The amount of times I've been asked by leaders, senior leaders outside of marketing, "Why is marketing still a thing?" Sustainability leads saying, "Why can't we just stop marketing?" And that's hard. 30 years of my career is kind of like, that's hard. So was about to leave, but then actually got kind of into a conversation with one of the professors, said, "Look, marketing's got a huge role to play." it can change behavior. It can grab hearts and minds and move us in a better direction. And actually, one of the things we need first and foremost at the moment is behavioral change. So that became a mission, myself and a couple of other colleagues, other marketers. And we set about saying, how do we make marketing a force for good? And to do that, we had to look at the tools and the processes and the mindsets that we have in marketeers at the moment and figure out, where the foundations are pointing us constantly in the wrong direction. And our foundations point us constantly towards growth. We have job titles which are growth engineers. And yet we approach growth from this point of growth as infinitesimal. We can just carry on growing forever, which is, be honest, ludicrous. We're on a finite planet. We're going to run out at some point in time. And actually that's getting closer and closer and closer. In some areas, some parts of the world, they say there's 60 harvests left.
That's crazy.
And it's people don't realize those sorts of things. You have to realize how close and how proximate this all is. So in interrogating marketing's foundations, we realized that its whole toolkit, its whole mindset, the muscles it have are around growth. Yeah, if we want to help it become a force for good in a sustainable world, it's got to grow new muscle. It's got to grow muscle from an environmental performance point of view. It's got to grow muscle from a societal performance point of view. So we set about writing a new strategic framework for marketing called the Sustainable Marketing Compass. And we played with that for a while. We eventually built it into a website. We launched it as an open source model because our goal is to impact marketing as much as possible. And we had 750,000 people view that within the first 24 hours, which kind of blew us away.
There's some good numbers.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, wow, there's a community of individuals out here that think the same way. And actually, maybe we've latched on to something that can help kind of move the dial and move the agenda. And what we don't want to do is be the answer. We can't be the answer. Marketing is a vast industry with so many sub-disciplines. But if we can signpost where all the pockets of expertise and brilliance are, then we can help people. And if we can put a strategic wrapper around it that says, this is how you might want to think about it, it can help people change. And that's what we've been doing. And that model now is embedded into courses offered by Cambridge. I can assess and help Cambridge write their sustainable marketing course. It's in courses with the CIM, with the IPA, and with NEMA. So we've had lots of traction in driving that forward.
So with a lot of marketeers and e-commerce experts who are listening to this podcast for the first time, they'll be listening to this thinking, I was directed to this because this is on top of my agenda. I want to get kicking off with this. So how should marketeers be really thinking about sustainability? Isn't it about decarbonizing our platforms and avoid greenwashing?
Well, yeah, yes to both of those, but you can't stop there. For digital e-commerce people, I think there's a great parallel to think about the transformation that we're facing. The transformation is as big as the digital transformation marketing went through over the last 15, 20 years. And you've got to think about just how impactful that was in the way that marketing operates. Arguably, we're right in the early days of sustainable transformation. And it's akin to what it was like in the early days of digital transformation, where you've got pockets of enthusiasm, like myself and my colleagues, kind of dotted around, trying to do things, trying to innovate. And hopefully we're going to get to a critical mass at the industry level and in the corporate level to actually try and drive change. So the change is that big, and you need to think that way. The other thing you need to think about is we had 15, 20 years to bumble through digital transformation. We haven't got that time. We've got to do it a lot quicker. So you've got to learn from a lot of those lessons. But if you're trying to get your head around what it is, what am I focused on, the way to think about it is in 3 areas, to be honest. And this is the research work we've been doing. And those 3 areas are where marketing's impacts are at the moment. So the first one is the commercial impact of marketing. So we do marketing to drive business at the moment, to drive growth. That obviously has some sort of impact. And there was a great bit of research done by the purpose disruptors called advertised emissions. And what this did was look at all the advertising in the UK and mapped the commercial uplift of that advertising with proper methodology behind it to support it, but then actually mapped the carbon footprint of that commercial imprint beyond, so ads to commercial to carbon. And what it realized, what it identified, was that the impact of advertising in the UK adds 32% to the carbon footprint of each and every individual in the UK. And that is staggering. 32% of my footprint has been driven by advertising. So there's that commercial of it, that's huge. And that's just carbon. And what I have to be very clear of is that there's very much a carbon myopia at the moment. Sustainability is everything from an environmental point of view and everything from a societal point of view. So that's the first pillar to think about. The second pillar is what's marketing's own environmental impacts on what we do. Carbon on the footprint of our websites, for example, so that the data centers of the world actually generate more carbon than the whole of the airline industry. There's one place to start. Outside of digital, this stat staggers me every time I have to say it. The carbon footprint of the event industry, the conference industry, exhibitions and everything, is bigger than the entire US.
So all activity across the US, so that's car travel, everything. Manufacturing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then you've got things like content production. In certain sectors, 80% of the content we generate as a marketing community is never actually used. And actually, we're a massively wasteful organization. We have this strange perceptual mindset in marketing that actually 1% is good. We're the only part of the corporate machine that can go up to the board, report at the board. We did a whole bunch of campaigns and we were 1% successful. And we just focus on that 1%. And actually, if we go from 1% to 1.1%, we're really delighted. When actually we should be going, that's a 99% waste. All that effort is completely wasted. All that carbon, all that production, all that work is wasted. No other function in the corporate board can get away with that. Imagine if you're in manufacturing, in the automotive industry, went to the board meeting and said, we made 100 cars this week and one of them worked.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get away with it. What marketing's effectiveness and efficiency has been on a decline ever since the mid-70s. If you go back and look at things like direct mail, in the mid-70s, a piece of direct mail would be opened by about 74%. Now, even with digital printing, with digital targeting, everything's personalized to you, it's around about 14%. 1% conversion rate online is a delight. It's a brilliant campaign. Quite often response rates are 0.006% or something like that. So think about the carbon footprint of that. It's kind of like the carbon footprint of a piece of direct mail, for example, with an attachment, so like a newsletter, roughly about 50 grams. Open rates in newsletters and emails in the UK at the moment around about 10 to 14%. So you send that piece of email to a database of 10,000 people and you've wasted about 420 kilograms of carbon.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah,
so
and it's because
for those who don't understand how that works, I mean, for me, I don't understand how that works. How is that calculated? So in terms of the actual amount of emails, how is that calculated into the carbon?
That one's done on the amount of carbon grams per email. And
Got you.
And this is a really complicated space, because you can say, yeah, but all my server farms are on renewables, so isn't that okay? And it's like, well, yeah, but you're still using a whole bunch of capacity that isn't needed. And actually, shouldn't we be stepping back and saying, why are we so poor at efficiency and efficacy that we're happy with 1%? Where's the genuine innovation in the industry that says we should be always 90% effective? Why is the curve coming down rather than the curve going up? We've got ourselves into that mind space. But, and there's calculators that are coming out now. So you've got the Impact Association, which is a collective of all the big media companies trying to build carbon calculators to do this. There's a brilliant company called Whole Grain Digital that have their own carbon calculators. So you can go and put this calculator against your website, figure out what footprint it's got. And there's lots of things about taking out that glorious UX with loads of overlays and graphics and everything. All ads come. All ads has impact and stuff like that. So they can offer you advice on how do you strip all that out to help you decarbonize your footprint from a digital point of view. So there's the environmental piece, and the final bit, and arguably of more impact and concern for marketeers and digital marketeers, is the societal impact. And a good place to start there is just to think about the brain print. This is the collective impact we have on society of all those messages that we put out there. So you and I will receive between 4,000 to 10,000 pieces of media communication, highly personalized and highly targeted to you every single day. And that's been growing over the last 70 years. For the last 70 years, we've been pumping this media hosepipe on society every day, delivering these messages. And most of these messages use a model which is inadequacy. You're too grey. You haven't been here on holiday? What do you mean you haven't bought a new car? Why are you buying that? You should be buying this kind of thing. Oh God, I haven't done enough, haven't done enough, haven't done enough. That's how a lot of our communications work. And that's now personalized and targeted directly at you. So it's not just like, oh, if you're a grey person, you should get your hair dyed. It's, Paul, you're too grey. It's really, really personal. So that has a collective impact, and that's something we're starting to look into. You've got kind of well-being considerations. You've got, lots of research coming out. For example, when Instagram did its research into its impact on teenage girls, and their concerns about their own bodies and things of that nature, some of that impact is horrific, and we need to be alert to it. But then also you've got things like bias in data. So actually, we use a lot of AI to inform our data, a lot of data algorithms to kind of determine who sees what and what messages they actually get. Malpractice in that can make, actually amplify bias that's already in society. There's a great example, a little bit old now, but of LinkedIn. They used AI to inform the targeting of their ads for C-suite roles they were trying to find. So lots of board level roles needed to find the right candidates. We use AI to find those candidates. So they train the AI on tenure and experience and salaries and all those sorts of good things. The only people that saw those ads were white middle-class males. So actually amplify the problems in society. During COVID, loads of things went online. Ignored the fact that still 30% of the population in the UK don't transact online. So disadvantage that part of the community. So we really need to be alert to bias. We also really need to be alert to kind of, the impacts of some of the kind of ways we use that data, such as dynamic pricing. There's a great bit of research done by Harvard that actually showed that when more affluent individuals demonstrate more bias signals. So if we're using bias signals to dynamically price, that actually means that the most affluent individuals get the lowest price, because less, wealthy, less affluent individuals express less bias signals because they don't think they can look, they don't think they can shop. Therefore, they don't get offered the best prices. So really disadvantaging things. And what that boils back to is the fact that marketing has a lack of duty of care towards its audiences, or a lack of contextual care. And the sorts of work we do is to step outside of marketing, to say, okay, so where else might you see contextual care or duty of care? And think about when you go and see your GP or go and see your doctor. They don't just say, how do I fix your elbow? Or, they'll actually look at the elbow, they'll look at your age, you look at your weight, you look at your where you live, your family situation. They bring into it that whole sense of contextual care around what's the best way to treat that patient. We should be adopting those sorts of things in the way we think about our audiences. So I've got a sugary drink to sell you. I can use all my data and all my dynamic targeting and all my kind of dynamic content messaging creation to make you buy, to deliver the right message, right time, to make you buy that sugary drink. We haven't taken into account the fact you're diabetic or overweight and on a diet. And what right do we have to force that individual to buy that drink. If we had a proper duty of care or contextual care, we should be able to do that stuff. We've got the data provisioning to be able to understand some of these scenarios without getting too intrusive. And it's all a balance of privacy and precision versus actual care. But we don't have those models in place at the moment to address it. So long answer, but you can see that, once you start diving into commercial impact, environmental impact, and the societal impact, marketing's got a long way to go.
I think, yeah, and I mean, in terms of what you mentioned, there is a lot, especially for those who are just starting out the journey of how they can incorporate sustainability. I guess, would you say a starting point would be, if they don't have the knowledge, would be to reach out to somebody who is an expert within this area, to, a consultant maybe, and then also just for, in their own time, that calculator that you mentioned, slot in it into their website or what they're currently doing to actually determine what sort of carbon they're actually emitting within their overall marketing practices.
Yeah, I think so. First steps would be to get you and your teams trained. There's some brilliant courses starting to appear now that but selfishly, of course, the Cambridge course I think is excellent. Get on the Cambridge course, get your teams trained on those sorts of things. Go on that journey. Establish a relationship with the sustainability people in your organization. There's a big issue there. It's kind of like, it's like the early days of digital again, where the digital folk didn't know how to speak to the analog folk. And we've now got to a place where everybody can have the same conversation and everybody has the same shared objectives. We've got to get to that place. Some of the more advanced kind of teams that we work with, marketing and sustainability are one and the same team. So get to know those sustainability people in your organization. They might not trust you at all when you first speak to them. We've got a lot of bridges to build. But build those relationships, understand where the organization's priorities are, and then figure out how they relate to your marketing. Then when you think about your own actual operations, yes, get educated, and then start measuring. You can't change anything until you start measuring things. So if you're concerned about your footprint of your digital estate, get a carbon tool, benchmark what you're actually doing, and then start measuring it. And then you can start thinking about how do we mitigate that? How do we bring that down? How do we bring that impact down? Equally on society, I think Group M's got a digital ethics calculator. So if you've got data, you can put data through the calculator and it will give you I think it's a probability-based kind of score on how much at risk of kind of being unethical are you. There are solutions popping up, and these are the sorts of things that we're trying to highlight through our work. But you've got to start with something that's very specific to you. So if your organization is focused on carbon, have a look at your own carbon things too, and find your areas to focus on. Do the measurement so you know where you are, and then set your plans in place for how you actually reduce them. One example would be slightly adjacent, but Microsoft a few years ago realized that actually it got a massive carbon footprint from its travel. So all its people traveling around the world. So it mapped that, said, okay, this is how much it is. We need to reduce that. So we're going to give every team a carbon budget. So you'd have a T&E budget on how much you can travel. Added to that is a carbon budget on how much you can actually spend on carbon as well. And we've started working with some companies about kind of carbon budgeting for media. So you've got £100,000 for your online advertising campaign, and you've got 100,000 kilograms of carbon, which would be kind of interesting on how that would shape the way you do things. And comes back to that thought about that blunderbuss 1% success rate. If you're trying to optimize your budget and optimize your carbon, you definitely want to get that 1% up.
Yeah.
To actually drive it up.
Just thinking about the complexities of actually making not just marketing, but also the business itself fully sustainable. Looking at the core roots of the point of manufacturer, where that manufacturing is based, particularly if you sell a product, for example. Yeah. How far it's getting transported, what materials are being used, from this is just me guessing, but for creating a fully sustainable product, my assumption would be that obviously the price could potentially increase a lot more compared to what it was beforehand. And then if you're, as a marketeer, focused on trying to decrease the amount of carbon credits, decrease the amount of carbon you're emitting through your overall marketing strategies and marketing campaigns, it does sound as though, especially with marketeers who are KPI'd and targeted to make profits every quarter and year on year, make those integral improvements. It seems like there's huge challenges from a business perspective, but also from a marketing perspective. And if you're leading marketing, you're sat there thinking, I want to, that the business has wanted me to make lots and lots of money next year, but also be fully sustainable, and they're pushing it from the core roots, from the owner or the CEO. I feel a bit shackled here. I feel, this is really, really challenging. Do you think it is possible to kind of tick every single box that I mentioned straight away, or do you think it's just a long journey these companies will have to take, and they will get to where they want to be eventually, particularly the big corporates, maybe not the SMEs, but the bigger corporates?
It's a journey, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no switch to turn on here, and you tap into a couple of really big, muscly conversations and topics in that, which in its own right is exciting for marketing, right? Because marketing's got a little bit tactic orientated over the last few years, and all of a sudden a lot of this is asking marketing to be strategic again, which is good. It's good for the health of the discipline. On the one hand, marketing supports the company. It's the engine of growth within the organization. If the organization's selling products that have an impact, what can you do about that? Now, depending on the sector and depending on the industry, you can be in different places. Some industries have had sustainability strategies for decades because legislation, regulation has driven them to do so. And in their supply chain operations, manufacturing, they've had to work to different rules to actually improve their sustainability, largely environmental performance. That means often marketing's catching up. You've got to go and figure out what are we doing, where we actually are, and how can marketing start contributing. And I think the guidance there is don't charge in as the kind of knight on the white horse coming to save the day, because actually there's been a whole bunch of people trying to do that for a long time and marketing's not paid attention. The flip side is where you've got an organization that's not paying any attention to this, and the marketing function's going, we're going to run out of market share here because our competitors are moving, and then marketing can actually drive the change as well. So you've got to figure out where you land in that equation. And then if you're in the agency world, that's a different consideration as well. If in the agency world, what are your clients doing? And actually, lots of clients are way behind the knowledge of lots of agencies are way behind the sustainability knowledge of their clients, which is a strange place to be. So, figure out where sustainability is in your organization and what role you can play within it. But in terms of that, we're just trying to sell and we've got to make money as well as do these other things. I think that's where that points to a new role for marketing. The role for marketing, ever since the 1950s, when our economic model was laid down, is around about growth. Our economic model, the model of capitalism, says that we need to grow the economy to grow the well-being in society, and that economic model was very purist and said that to make that work we had perfect knowledge and rational man, they said, rational individuals, of which any marketeer will go, well, that's utter rubbish. Perfect knowledge and we're rational? No, we're emotional. We don't know what's out there. And that's where marketing came into the mix to actually make our economic model work. And over the last 70 years, we've been phenomenally good at it. But actually, the economic models are changing. So ever since the 1980s and 1990s, economists have been trying to bring in environmental factors and societal factors into economics. So Howard Stern did it in the Stern Report in 1990s. Now you've got models like circularitics, you've got donut economics by Kate Raworth. They're all new models for economics that actually are going to be adopted by society. So Amsterdam, the city of Amsterdam, now runs itself on donut economics. So marketing's got to find its new role in those new economic models. So it needs to figure out how it can drive societal, environmental, and commercial performance. And exactly to your point, that's a bit of a tension, isn't it? I'm being pulled all over the place. But that's also really exciting because it means marketing's role goes from being an engine of growth to more that regulatory valve that's sort of saying, okay, so our demands are doing great from a commercial point of view, but that's to the detriment of our environmental performance or our societal one. It's like stretching a balloon over three kind of competing levers. And marketing can sit in the middle to say, okay, how do we balance this out? And we strategically all the way through to tactically on that sort of thing. And that can become really quite exciting on how that impacts things. It sounds very theoretical and very kind of academic, but we did a bit of work with one of the grocers that was actually introducing a refill station. I had introduced a refill station. Nobody using it. Back at the store, not being used. And it's kind of like, and they're saying, well, have we got the wrong colours? Do we need to put, somebody standing by it with a mop to clean up the cereal when you've dropped it on the floor? Why isn't it being used? And we had a look at it. And it's only when we looked at that model, could you really figure out what's going on? They'd added this new line in as an incremental revenue line. So they got all their convenience food and their kind of refill thing as on more to sell. At the same time, they've got a huge societal focus on low-income families. So to help in the current climate, they'd introduced a whole new range of low-income food that was available. There was another incremental revenue line. So all of a sudden, you got the three pillars very evident. You'd kind of got the commercial growth, you've got an environmental goal, and you got a societal goal. And there's one set of budgets being split around that to drive performance of them. And you can guess where the bulk of that budget was going. It was going into the convenience food. So you're spending several million over here driving that and £3.50 over here driving and it's kind of like, that's where you suddenly start seeing that thinking becoming really important. And it can drive conversations at the board level, but all the way down through to how marketing activates.
Obviously, there's so many complexities, from what I mentioned earlier in the previous question. So if marketeers are looking at shining examples of other marketeers, senior marketeers, or even brands themselves who are really paving the way, I guess, against their peers within the industry, who would you say are the shining examples who are really doing well with sustainability?
Yeah. I mean, some of the obvious ones are people like Patagonia. We saw the stuff they did last year. Maybe less well known, the kind of shampoo people, Faith in Nature, do lots in this space. Really interestingly, last year they changed their board structure and actually have nature represented on their board. So they actually have an NGO-based organisation that puts representation on their board to actually make sure that every decision they make has an environmental consideration in it. So you've got things like that beginning to, which are really quite mind-bending at first. Is kind of like, how do you put nature onto the board? But then you've got people like Tony's Chocolate Only, which I talk about lots, who only exist to take children out of slave labor conditions in the cocoa industry. And actually, the thing they report above and beyond anything else is how many children they've got in their supply chain in those conditions, and they've managed to take out of those conditions. Oh, yes, and we made some money making chocolate, but we made that money to allow us to be able to do that role. But Tony's have got that mission, but it manifests through everything that they do, even through to the chocolate bar itself. And have you ever tried a Tony's bar?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
but also it's not uniform squares. It's all higgledy-piggledy, small bits, big bits, and all that sort of thing. And the whole point there is life's not fair. If ever I share a bar with my daughter, I get the little bit and she gets the big fat bit. It's kind of like they're manifesting their ethos and their mission in the product. They do an advent calendar each year, and there's always one day that's empty and has a little message in there that says, there's children in this world that are that helped pick this chocolate for you. I've never tasted chocolate. So my 9-year-old daughter now knows that. So and Tony's have got, through a whole new approach to their marketing, they've never actually done advertising. They've done brilliant marketing, but never actually done advertising. And it drives a whole new innovative approach to things. Other people that have started doing this sort of thing, like Tesla. So, Tesla set out saying we're never going to spend more than 25% of what your traditional go-to-market costs of a car would be. So they don't have salespeople and things of that sort of nature. You've never seen a Tesla ad. They actually use the vehicle themselves itself as a channel. So I don't know if you've seen Tesla Light Show. So you can actually program the lights on a Tesla to go on and off to music. And that showed this huge social media kind of thing, and you get people with Teslas all in a line, like an orchestra, doing things. So it forces the marketeer to step completely out of the tram lines. There's a great article, a great research report done by McKinsey, a couple actually from McKinsey, that say that marketing's stuck on some tram lines now. And I think this is really important for digital marketeers. So we have paid media, we have search, we have our social platforms, we have our websites, we have our e-commerce platforms, we have data, and we have content gluing them all together. And then we have your Metas and your Googles and your Amazons of this world, that are the big platforms we go out through. We're all on the same tram lines. So actually the ability to differentiate on those tram lines is really, really limited. And the other report from McKinsey actually highlights that a lot of clients are pretty much asleep at the wheel on those tram lines, because they let agencies and the aggregators and the media platforms themselves do all the operations and the optimization and the targeting and everything. So, which isn't necessarily in the best interest of the client, but definitely works for the media house. So everybody's on the same thing, doing the same thing, and letting the computers run the computers. Not necessarily a healthy place for us to be. Where's the genuine innovative thinking that marketers celebrate? How do we step off those tram lines, and actually kind of do genuinely innovative stuff?
And are there any other senior marketeers who are doing really well, who maybe not be part of? I'm just trying to think how to phrase this question. So Terry's, the chocolate bar, their sustainability, as well as Patagonia, their products are coming from a sustainable position. But are there any marketeers who are kind of stuck in the mud with brands which aren't in a fortunate position to where the brand is really pushing sustainability at its root cause? Are there any marketeers who I would say who are shackled or stuck in mud, who are really persevering and doing some really good things where the product may not be where it needs to be from a sustainable point of view? Or do you think there isn't really any examples like that, and you need the product as well as the marketing strategy to co-align?
Well, I think there's lots of people in that really hard place. Arguably, most of us are in that really hard place. And a consequence of that is all the greenwashing we're seeing.
Yeah.
Where you're seeing marketing departments really trying to push the sustainability agenda, but actually the operations of the organization, the product of the organizations don't ladder up. And that's where we've got to be really, really careful. Consumer demand is, and even B2B demand through supply chains is actually driving sustainability markets. So we've got to, as marketeers, we've got to respond to that and actually work with that. But a lot of us are going to be in organizations where there's baggage, real baggage. And if you're not careful, you're always going to get caught out with greenwashing, which is what, 2% of claims at the moment in the UK are spurious, to say the least. And the extra complication there is all the legislation coming in, which is absolutely the right legislation. So legislation coming out, the CMA, the Competition Markets Authority, in the UK will fine companies up to 10% of global turnover for greenwashing. The EU put out its own similar things yesterday as well. And we're seeing every day examples of greenwashing. An airline recently got itself into lots of problems with greenwashing as well. So, those marketing departments that are in those places where they've got organizations that got a big impact have really got to lean in and understand this topic. Otherwise, they will greenwash. And by leaning in, they can help move the company as well. Lots of marketing departments don't have proper, strong relationships with their sustainability teams, as we said earlier. And that's where a lot of the greenwashing actually comes from. It's kind of like you've got to dive into some of these topics and dive into some of these understandings. Something I spotted personally this morning, trying to find my machine's dying on me, and I'm trying to find a refurbished new machine. And lots of the online vendors now that do leasing models, yes, they'll take my machine back, and then they'll say for an extra few percent you can offset it. And it's kind of like, okay, so what exactly is that offsetting? Just putting that out and not understanding exactly what that offsetting is could lead you into a world of pain as well, because there's a huge amount of complexity in carbon trading and carbon offsetting. Some of it's mandatory, some of it's voluntary, some of it's good, some of it's not. Increasingly, offsetting models are market-based and probably more aligned to the UN SDGs of a corporate rather than the carbon target of a corporate. There's a huge amount of complex technical things going on in the sustainable world that are becoming front and foremost in the marketeers world, and we don't understand them. Part of that's education, but the other part of that is actually getting the relationships with the sustainability teams really solid and understanding what's going on. So to come back to kind of teams that are stuck in that place, I mean, all teams are stuck in that place.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out which way to go ahead.
So there'll be a lot of e-commerce guys and girls who will be listening to this podcast, as well as the marketeers. So people who trade merchandise websites and obviously trying to sell as much product as they possibly can through that means. From my experience, what I've seen a lot of is you buy a product or you send an email out, we'll plant a tree for you. Let's do a meeting together. Let's plant a tree to offset the carbon emissions. I don't know what your thoughts are on that with businesses incorporating that into their overall sustainable strategies, particularly from an e-commerce perspective. I've not really seen any examples of where you buy a product and offset your carbon emissions and plant a tree. Maybe Patagonia do it on their website. I don't know. I've not been on it recently, but
I mean, your airlines do it. Singapore Airlines now actually include offsetting of your flight in the cost of the flight. Other airlines tend to say you can add it as a voluntary thing afterwards. I saw it this morning for one of the first times I've seen it on kind of consumer electronics devices as well. So you are seeing it come in there. It's you've got to be really careful what you're using it for. It's and this is exactly a conversation with your sustainability team and what the objectives are. You can't use. There's different types of offsetting. You've got mandatory and you've got voluntary. You can't use voluntary against your carbon targets. If you've got a net zero strategy,
interesting.
From the Paris Protocol, I think it was. I might have got that wrong. The only offsets you can use against your net zero strategy are the mandatory ones that are set at a regional level. On top of that, you have voluntary carbon credits, which could be used to augment your kind of carbon footprint if you want to go carbon negative or stuff like that, or you want to align them to maybe you're a marine brand and you want to do more than your mandatory. You could buy some sort of what's called blue carbon. Rather than investing in trees, you're investing in ocean solutions. But you've got so you've got to figure out what are those solutions. There's a myriad of them going on out there. Some of them are properly regulated, others aren't. So, at the moment, lots of companies are going, voluntary carbon credits, I'm not touching that. We talk to the kind of sustainability leads in big organizations, and they're not really going near voluntary credits. But actually, these voluntary credits have been putting out through those sorts of sites those credits putting out through those sorts of sites are voluntary. So, that's just one little example where you need to go and unpick and figure out what's exactly going on there. I did see a request going through one of the chat groups. Somebody saw it saying, "Is there an app I can just plug in some offsetting credits?" It's kind of like, I wouldn't do it that way.
Yeah.
You might need an app to actually do the facilitation, where you've got to figure out exactly what's going on in the back end there. Otherwise, you'll just be flying for greenwashing.
That's what I was going to ask you as well. So people who are starting to think about this or wants to be directed to certain best practices or suppliers, are there any agencies, consultancies, and I think you've answered it already anyway, but any plugins that particularly e-commerce people can plug in, or even technologies marketeers can use to help them on their journey? Is there anyone that you'd advocate for?
There's some good agencies and networks beginning to pop up. I mentioned Whole Grain Digital earlier. Brilliant team. They have a whole bunch of carbon tools to looking at decarbonising, and they can strategically advise you as well. And there's bigger, if you're a big organisation joining things like Dimpact and those sorts of industry level associations, that's got a membership of about 20 massive media partners like Dentsu, a BBC, a Channel 4, and things of that nature. Then you've got, from a paid media point of view, there's a phenomenal organisation headed up by a chap called Jake Dubbins. That's the Conscious Advertising Network. They do staggeringly good events where they bring people together from within the industry, but also outside of the industry to kind of look at the ethics around paid online media. And they have 7 charter that organizations can sign up to that offer best practice and advice on how to look at things, and everything from avoiding kind of like inadvertently funding terrorism or child pornography and things like that, to kind of not being biased, look at the way you look at consent and, carbon footprinting as well. So you've got people like that. So there's an increasing number of bodies beginning to look into this. A lot of, at the moment, you've got more NGO type communities, so that the Conscious Advertising Network will go and lobby at Cannes. You've got the purpose disruptors that are looking at the environmental impact of advertising. That's a community you can go and join. It's headed up by a chap called Jonathan Wise. He's just awesome. Then you've got almost like societal groups coming together, like Green Creatives, 1% for the Planet, people like that. They're kind of more almost activist type groups that are coming together, where your team members can go and find out what's going on, what best practice is. So it's, like I said, early days of digital. It's very grassroots. It's very foundational going on. It's kind of like, go and find them, explore them. We try and highlight a load from our work as well. There's more structural things beginning to happen too. So if you're a purpose-led brand, or you want to bring this better sense of purpose into what you're doing, there's actually now a British standard for purpose, which is PAS, PAS 808. It's all driven by a professor of marketing called Victoria Hirth. A great bit of work, really kind of solid thinking, but actually starts putting standards down for what best practice is and some of the considerations you actually have. So that's an interesting new kind of avenue for marketeers. They don't normally tend to think about ISOs and BS standards and things of that sort of nature. And some of the big agency networks are beginning to get their head around this. They're big oil tankers, quite literally in some cases. But I'm not going to go there. But the big organizations are going to take a while to shift and to move. But some of them are beginning to think about proper propositions, strategic, all the way through to kind of, responsible media you can buy. So I think OMD are working on a responsible media offering as an example. And also media offerings that are coming out of some of the other big media networks that are trying to tackle that 99% to 1% thing. So actually it might cost me more, but actually if I've just spoken to 1,000 rather than 100,000 people, that's okay. If those 1,000 people are the ones I really need to talk to. So I think that the challenge, if you're in that space, is get yourself educated so you know what questions you're asking, and then go and join some of these groups that are really actually leading the thinking of what best practice needs to be.
And as a final point, so anyone who's starting their journey or looking to improve what they're doing, what final piece of advice would you give to somebody?
That you're going to go on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Gemma Butler from Can Marketing Save the Planet, which is a brilliant podcast to watch, actually. They've got like 50 interviews with some brilliant, 50 plus now, yeah, brilliant people. She talks about the light bulb moment. You know, when the light bulb goes on for a marketeer around its sustainability impacts, it can't go off. You know, there's no way I could go back to my kind of like previous way of thinking about things. But that can be quite hard on you emotionally. You know, it's kind of like you go into that trough of despair. It's like, oh hell. I mean, I've done kind of like inspiration breakfast talks and stuff like that. And I did one just before Christmas at an agency where after my talk, an individual upped and handed in their notice and left. It's like, hopefully it wasn't that bad. But it's kind of like people can go through quite on a knee jerk here. But actually, when you figure out the opportunity for marketing to really drive change and help us on this journey to be sustainable, that's really exciting. You know, we talk about the heyday of marketing, like in the 60s and 70s when we were really important. We can be that again. You know, we can really help change behavior and drive for a better world. And that's really exciting and arguably more exciting than just selling things.
And what are the next steps for you over the next year or two?
Well, we're still driving the Compass. The Compass is an open source model, so we've got to iterate it. We want everybody to come in and iterate it. We're working with the education bodies. The big thing we're thinking about is how can we bring a consortia together to kind of say, okay, how do we collectively tackle things like brain print? How can we collectively think about what's a duty of care that we can bring, or a contextual care model? And it's not anything we just write ourselves. You know, it's like bringing in as many experts as possible. So it's like if anybody's really interested in getting involved in that sort of thought level leadership, please get in touch. And because what we want to do is bring bodies together and then actually drive action. It's kind of like, so what does that mean? Okay, how do I actually improve the brain print of my organization? So we're trying to get to our next steps beyond on the Compass, where we're actually tackling some of those bigger topics.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Good catch up again about a really important topic. I love chatting to you about sustainability. And I think we covered some new points as well. And what I like, there's some key takeaways for marketeers, especially within the digital leaders group. And we'll share this amongst the wider community as well. And then if anyone's interested in reaching out to Paul to pick his brain, or even speak to him about some short-term projects or kind of an understanding how they can incorporate sustainability into their marketing teams, definitely get in contact with him. So I'll share his LinkedIn handle. And yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for checking back in.
All the best. Thanks.